was one of Europe's top destinations before the pandemic. Now Portugal is picking up where it left off. The country welcoming 2.8 million tourists in the first 3 months of the year. That figure even higher than the pre-pandemic quarterly record of 2.5 million tourists from the same period in 2019. You can see it there. The locals say that there is a dark side to the boom. Rents are rising dramatically, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for residents to make ends meet.
Portugal's largest bank has run into some trouble. Reports of a missed debt payment sent shockwaves across the markets worldwide on Thursday and Friday, raising fears that the effect could end up bogging down Europe's already sluggish recovery.
The number of homeless people in Portugal are on the rise. The impact of the Ukraine conflict has contributed to food price inflation. Rising living costs are exacerbating this problem further. Many people in the country rely on charities for food, but even these charities are now struggling to cope with the pressure.
Even professors, now they make a living poaching clams in the rivers of Portugal. It's just one example of people trying to make ends meet in the country where unemployment has now reached 17.7% of the working population. The country's economy is set to shrink again by more than 2% this year as even more people lose their jobs as the government forces ever deeper austerity measures to keep its international lenders happy.
Portugal is selling a dream it can't afford. The beaches are still golden, the wine still cheap, the streets still beautiful. But for locals, life here is slipping out of reach. In Lisbon, rent for a small flat can swallow almost an entire paycheck. Wages haven't moved in years. And the same country tourists call paradise is quietly pushing its own people out. Portugal's road to this crisis is a story of ambition, opportunity, and unintended consequences. After joining the European Union in 1986, the country saw a rush of investment. Roads, railways, and public services improved. Joining the Eurozone in 1999 brought access to low-interest credit, and for a while, it seemed like the country was on an unstoppable upward path. Then came the 2008 global financial crisis. Portugal's economy contracted sharply, and like Greece, it was hit with debt concerns and EU-imposed austerity. Public sector wages were cut, pensions reduced, and taxes increased. Young people entering the workforce during this time faced a bleak job market with low pay and limited prospects. At the same time, Portugal began leaning heavily on tourism and foreign investment to boost growth. It worked in the short term. Tourist arrivals more than doubled from 2010 to 2019, and the Golden Visa program brought billions into the property market. But this created a dangerous imbalance. The housing market began to serve investors and visitors first, and residents second. We'll come back to why that shift is at the core of today's crisis.
Protesters in Portugal have taken to the streets in their thousands to rally against rising house prices and rent. Rental prices have jumped 65% since 2015, and house prices have increased by 137%. Data shows the average monthly wage is far less than the median monthly rent price in the capital, Lisbon. The government has announced a housing package which bans new Airbnb licences, but locals argue it is not enough to lower house prices in the short term.
Housing is where Portugal's crisis is most visible and most painful. In Lisbon's Arero district, new rental contracts in 2023 averaged €13 per square meter. That means €1,380 a month for a flat that used to cost half that less than a decade ago. In Alvalade, the numbers are almost identical. Even Porto, long considered a cheaper alternative, has seen rents rise by over 40% in just 5 years. In the first quarter of 2025, Portugal led the EU in house price growth, up 16.3% year on year. For investors, it's a gold mine. For locals, it's a lockout. Consider a young couple in Coimbra. Both work full-time, one as a teacher, the other in IT. Together they earn €2,800 a month. On paper, it sounds comfortable, but with central rent starting at €900 for a one-bedroom, plus utilities, groceries, and transport, they have almost nothing left to save. Buying a home? Out of reach. Banks demand deposits that could take them more than a decade to save. This isn't just an urban issue. Even in smaller towns, proximity to the coast or tourist interest has driven rents beyond the reach of longtime residents, which leads to the question, who exactly are these homes for? High housing costs might be manageable if incomes rose to meet them, but in Portugal, wages have barely moved in decades. In 2025, the average net salary is €1,412 per month. The minimum wage sits at €870, with a government plan to raise it to €1,000 by 2028. Historically, Portugal positioned itself as a low-cost labor market in Europe, which worked when living costs matched. But now that housing and basic goods are priced like Western Europe, wages feel stuck in the past. This wage stagnation forces impossible choices. Many families spend 70 to 80% of their income just on rent. Over 250,000 workers held 2 or more jobs in 2023, often juggling shifts that leave little time for rest. Others move far from city centers, trading hours of commute time for cheaper housing. And for many young adults, independence is delayed indefinitely. They remain in the family home well into their 30s, which brings us to one of the most damaging consequences: a generation leaving. Since 2008, more than 360,000 Portuguese aged 15 to 35 have emigrated. That's nearly a third of the generation that should be building the country's future. They've gone to Germany, France, the UK, Belgium, anywhere that offers higher wages and affordable housing. The loss isn't just economic. In rural areas, schools close for lack of students. Local shops shutter. Festivals at once filled town squares now draw only a fraction of the crowd. By 2050, 1 in 3 Portuguese will be over 65. With fewer young workers, the tax base shrinks, pensions strain, and the economy slows. Walk through certain fishing villages in the Algarve, and you'll find more empty houses than working-age residents. In Porto, community sports clubs have had to merge because there aren't enough children to form teams. The exodus is slow, quiet, but relentless, and it's changing the country's demographic shape in ways that will be hard to reverse. In late 2024, Portugal introduced a flagship retention policy, a 10-year income tax break for young workers earning up to €28,000 annually. Year 1, no income tax. Over a decade, the rate rises to 25%. First-time homebuyers also get exemptions from transaction taxes and stamp duty. This program, aimed at 350,000 to 400,000 young people, costs €645 million annually. The goal is clear: make staying financially appealing. But critics point out the flaws. Tax breaks don't lower rent. They don't stop speculative property buying. And they don't close the wage gap with the rest of Western Europe. Even the IMF has warned that without broader structural changes, wage growth, affordable housing construction, and tighter regulation of the property market, such incentives will have limited impact. For many young workers, the math still doesn't work. Keeping a bigger slice of your paycheck is meaningless if the rent still takes nearly all of it. Foreign demand plays a central role in the affordability crisis. Portugal's Golden Visa program, launched in 2012, attracted billions in investment, much of it into property. Digital nomad visas followed, bringing remote workers from higher income economies. For these newcomers, €1,500 a month for a central Lisbon flat is a bargain. For locals, it's out of reach. Neighborhoods like Alfama and Graça have shifted from family homes to short-term rentals. In Porto's Ribeira district, over half of properties now target tourists or expats. The Algarve has seen entire apartment blocks bought up by investors who visit only a few weeks a year. For the rest of the time, those homes sit dark, contributing nothing to the local housing supply. Tourism and foreign capital bring undeniable economic benefits, but when housing becomes an asset class first and a basic need second, the market stops working for the people who live there. Portugal's macro numbers look strong. GDP growth around 2%, unemployment under 6%, high rankings for safety and quality of life. But nearly 20% of the population lives at risk of poverty or social exclusion. The fertility rate at 1.36 children per woman is among the lowest in Europe, a sign that young people don't feel secure enough to start families. In Lisbon's Alfama, the tourist experience is everything you'd hope for: narrow streets, tiled facades, music spilling from taverns. But behind the scenes, residents quietly move out, replaced by short-term guests. Grocery stores become souvenir shops. Schools lose students. The Portugal of postcards is still real, but it's becoming less lived in by the people who made it what it is. If nothing changes, the pattern is clear. Cities will become more like open-air museums, beautiful, visited, but hollowed out. Rural areas will age further. With services disappearing, the economy will lean ever more on tourism, making it vulnerable to global shocks. By the 2040s, the combination of an aging population, shrinking workforce, and a housing market disconnected from local incomes could create a long-term economic slowdown. Infrastructure built for growth may be underused. Cultural traditions tied to community life may fade. Portugal could remain admired worldwide, but become a place where more Portuguese live abroad than at home. There are two Portugals now, the one seen from the outside, charming and timeless, and the one lived from the inside, where wages lag, housing costs soar, and staying feels harder each year. If the country wants to keep its people, it will need more than tax breaks and sunny skies. It will need homes built for residents, wages that reflect the cost of living, and a property market that values community as much as profit. Because without those changes, the Portugal of tomorrow may be even prettier than today, but way emptier and quieter. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth news on other economies of the world. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.